Hi everyone, I'm Kat and I have 3 things for you today. Romanian words, true crime and makeup. So for today's word, I got a request from Amelia Sparkles to translate a certain color. The color in Romanian for today is turquoise. 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 Well done guys, you just said turquoise. A pig farmer accused of killing his wife and dumping her body in a septic tank so that he could run away with his secret lover has been found guilty of her murder. David Venables, 89 years old, murdered his wife Brenda, 48 years old, but he got away with her murder for almost 40 years until Brenda's skull was found in the septic tank when it was being emptied. Now, let me add that this septic tank was on their property where they built their dream home. So, let's find out exactly what happened. David Venables met his good-looking wife-to-be at Droitwich Winter Gardens in the UK during a Worcester and Kidderminster Young Farmers Club social in 1957, when he was 25 years old and she was 23 years old. They danced together, they had common friends, they would have refreshments as well at the club, there would be drinks, sandwiches, trifles, so they decided to get to know one another. What attracted David to Brenda was the fact that she was always pleasant. Whenever they went out, she was always good company and they got on well. She was very good looking and appealing. They would see each other once every 10 days while courting, mainly on evenings and weekends when they would go to shows, for a drive or just a day out somewhere. David split his time between seeing Brenda with working on the family-owned Bainhall farm with his father until his death in 1977, and younger brother Peter. The family reared 3,000 pigs a year for bacon. They had an acre of glass houses growing plants and vegetables and a further 436 acres of arable and grassland. Brenda's home was in the village of Rushock, between Bromsgrove and Droitwich. So David would also stop in for breakfast on the way home from 4 a.m. trips, taking produce from the farm to Birmingham market. The couple got married on June 1st, 1960 at Brenda's local parish church in Rushock before going for their honeymoon in Jersey for a week. David's father gave land at Quacking House Farm, which he had set aside to build his own retirement property, to the oldest of his 2 sons and David to build a marital home. The property in Bestman's Lane was finished shortly after the wedding and had a magnificent view of the surrounding countryside, and the couple moved into the house around February 1961. David was the one who actually supervised the build of the house, and he had the septic tank built in the grounds of the home. No one really knew that there was a septic tank apart from David and another worker who emptied the tank later. This tank was secluded. The couple had no children of their own, and to outsiders their lives seemed simple yet idyllic. But on 3rd of May 1982, Brenda Venables vanished. David reported Brenda's disappearance to police the next day, on May the 4th. He said that on the day Brenda disappeared was a perfectly normal day with them sowing potatoes. She seemed to be enjoying playing with the puppy on the rug, and he noticed nothing unusual in that mood that evening or after they went to bed, and he had just woken up to find that she was just gone. This was out of character for Brenda. She's never just disappeared, and David said he had no idea what happened to her. He was unable to sleep since she went missing, and he also mentioned that Brenda had been suffering from depression because of a recent flu she had. Which I don't know what to make of that, because do you really get depression from a flu that you have? That seems quite strange to me, if I'm honest. I don't know, you guys let me know what you think. Can you actually get depression from having a flu? I don't know, I just find that a bit hard to believe. The village of Campsie was soon overrun as the search for Brenda got underway. West Mercia police used a helicopter to help with the search, and tracker dogs checked farm buildings and derelict properties, but no trace of Brenda was found. Vicky Jennings, a friend of the couple, noticed that David didn't seem overly concerned about his wife, and he didn't appear to be searching for her. David Harrison, who at the time ran the Farmers Arms pub on Bestman's Lane in Kempsey, remembers that everyone was surprised by Brenda's disappearance, just the same as with any person that goes missing. It just becomes the talk of the entire village. There was lots of speculation and lots of rumors. The police search lasted 2 or 3 weeks, covering a 4 or 5 mile area around Kempsey up to the M50 motorway, including Harrison's own 9 acres of land. There was a great deal of police going around searching everywhere to see if there was anything anywhere that would lead to finding Brenda. They cut back all the growth on the ditches to see if there was anything in the ditches, but they couldn't find anything. For almost 40 years, Brenda's family was left without a single answer about what happened to her. However, police overlooked one place during the initial searches. They never searched the septic tank on David's property. West Mercia Police Constable Peter Sherrock, who was among the search teams, said that the septic tank was overlooked in the searches, and at the time it just looked like a pad of concrete and he didn't really pay it any attention. So I guess that by now you probably figured out what happened. Tens of years would go by. In fact, 40 years went by until July 2019, when human remains were found in a septic tank in the grounds of Quacking House Farm. By this point, David Venables had sold the farm and moved out in 2014 to a bungalow close by. The new owners of the farm wanted to have the tank serviced. Fun fact: the new owner of the farm is none other than David's nephew, Andrew Venables. I honestly, guys, I can't believe that David sold his house to family, fully knowing what was in the septic tank. To the horror of engineer Alistair Pitt, he found a large clump of hair before uncovering a human skull. A pelvis and thigh bones were also recovered, even though it was impossible to determine the cause of death. Remnants of clothing, including half a pair of knickers, a pair of tights, a bra, remains of some shoes, and a sweater were also found in the tank. On July 2019, police are notified, and over the following days, police officers and firefighters are involved in recovering the remains from the tank. At the time of the discovery, a search was ongoing just 7 miles away from estate agent Susie Lamplugh, who disappeared in London in 1986. A site near Perthshire had been identified after new information arose following a search the previous year of a property in Southern Coalfield, which once belonged to the mother of prime suspect John Cannon, but police said there was no link between the remains and Susie Lamplugh. It took more than 1 year until detectives announced the bones had formally been identified as those of Brenda Venables. On July 30th, 2019, David Venables was arrested for the murder of his wife, Brenda. David was 88 years old when he was charged with her murder. On September the 7th, 2021, David Venables appeared at Worcester Crown Court and denied the count of murdering his wife on a day between May the 2nd and May the 5th, 1982. No one knew that David was hiding a horrible secret and led a double life. Before her death, Brenda had become depressed by her husband's multiple affairs and the fact that she had been unable to conceive. Remember how David said that she got depressed because she had the flu? Well, the real reason is because he was cheating on her multiple times, and all the while she was struggling to conceive. I'm sure I can imagine him telling her over and over again, you're not a woman because you can't give me a child, blah blah blah, you know, all these horrible things that some men would say, trying to blame their wife for not giving them a child. Brenda visited both her GP and the consultant psychiatrist to help her deal with her mental health. Allegedly, she told her psychiatrist, Dr. Richards, that she and her husband had not had sex since 1969 and they were sleeping separately. Doctors tried to make appointments to see the couple together, but David repeatedly said that he was just too busy. Maybe David was too busy to have those affairs? Despite this, when he was interviewed by police, he claimed that their marriage was ordinary and that they were still sleeping together. Dr. Richards tried to have Brenda hospitalized sometime before her death, saying that she was depressed and needed treatment, but the move was blocked by her husband. And I think that I know why. I think it's safe to assume to save faces for appearances, you know, small village, big farmer, talk of the town, all that. Dr. Richards called David a typical farmer, displaying little to no affection towards his wife, but showering praise on the family dog. As it turns out, dear old David had a long-standing affair with his mother's former carer, Lorraine Stiles, behind Brenda's back. When he was questioned about this, David confirmed he had been in a 14-year relationship with Lorraine, but he denied it was an affair, saying it was just something quite casual. An officer replied, quote, having sex with a woman over a 14-year period, I think she would say that's some sort of relationship. That's not casual, end of quote. And I think that everybody would agree with the police officer. Great answer there. David said that the relationship was overplayed and he told officers that he never planned to leave his wife for Lorraine. Lorraine, who has since passed away, said in a witness statement previously that she and David had an affair lasting 14 years from the late 1960s until 1982. That's why David wouldn't have sex with his wife since 1969, because he was getting it from Lorraine during that time. According to Lorraine, David promised her that he will leave his wife and live with her at her home in Worcester, and he even talked about divorcing Brenda. So, of course, that David is being asked if Lorraine would be someone he would leave Brenda for. And David replied, no, definitely not. And because poor Lorraine sadly passed away and she can't defend herself anymore or contradict whatever David is saying about her, evidently that he is trying to discredit her character. David says that Lorraine had a really volatile temperament and found out many years before Brenda's disappearance. So then, if he found out many years before Brenda's disappearance that Lorraine had a volatile temperament, then my question is, why would he carry on seeing her if he didn't like these things, you know? David, I think that you're trying to prove that Lorraine was no one and she was so toxic that you wouldn't kill Brenda to be with her. That's what it sounds like to me. Even though, according to David, Lorraine was friendly, she had an erratic nature. Sometimes she would be quite normal and then suddenly she would be bad-tempered and moody. David vehemently denied the long-standing relationship, even adding that there were very big gaps when he would not see or speak with her. According to him, they had contact around late 1982 after Brenda disappeared, when Lorraine just turned up at his home. David said, quote, she came to my house one day quite unannounced and said, now you're on your own, I can come live with you. I said, well, that's never going to happen. In fact, she used a lot of verbal abuse to me and got in her car and drove away at great speed down the drive. End of quote. But David claimed that when they did have contact, they just talked about what happened and that was all, denying that they rekindled their sexual relationship as Lorraine had claimed. Obviously that David said Lorraine had plans for their relationship and she would have been really pleased if David would go with her, but he of course had no intentions of doing that. He also claimed that he and his wife's relationship remained a sexual one and that they continued to share a bed right up until she vanished. By now, as I'm sure It's quite obvious Lorraine's story contradicts David's story entirely. Even though Lorraine Stiles had died in 2017, a statement she had given to police in 1984 after Brenda Venables had disappeared painted a completely different picture. She said that the day after David reported his wife missing to the police, he called her. He seemed composed, and then he suddenly told her that his wife had disappeared the night before and he was phoning her to let her know before she read it in the paper. I mean, was this David's way of telling Lorraine, hey, I'm free, we can now be together forever? David called her back around 2 weeks later, but this time he didn't mention anything about his wife. Lorraine couldn't understand at all how David was so collected about the whole situation. Prosecutor Michael Burrows, Queen's Counsel, told jurors that David wanted Brenda out of the way, as he wanted to resume his long-standing affair with another woman. David knew about the septic tank in its secluded location. It was for him almost the perfect hiding place, and for nearly 40 years it was the perfect place, and he got away with murder. David had said that he cleaned the septic tank out on several occasions before his wife's remains were found by contractors. He even asked officers, "What evidence have you got? These bones, are you sure it's my wife?" He also said that he has no knowledge that there was anything in there at all. He said that if he had known there was anything like that in the tank, he would have sold the farm. Quote, "It would be pretty obvious that at some time it would be discovered," he added. He said that he cleaned the tank out 2 or 3 times between 1961 and 1982, and once between 1982 and when he sold the house in 2014. So David really did sell the house, just like he said that he would if he knew there would be something there. And besides, let's be honest here, he knew that his wife's remains were in that tank, and even if he cleaned it a few times as he claimed, even in 2014, he would have seen that by this point there would only be bones left, if anything, so he probably thought that even if someone would come across them, they would think nothing of it, or maybe he assumed they would be washed away. I mean, I don't know how a septic tank works, so I have no idea if, they could be washed away. He could also have cleaned the tank on purpose when he sold the house so that no one needs to access it. I really don't know what went through David's head. Anyway, David also told police that before Brenda went missing, she had been quite depressed and always very disappointed about never having children, especially because she had 2 sisters who had 6 children between them. David implied that perhaps because of her depression, Brenda killed herself by jumping in the septic tank. At one point, David even suggested in police interviews that Gloucestershire serial killer Fred West may have been responsible for his wife's death. On June 13, 2022, just last month, David Venables' trial for murder started at Worcester Crown Court. Michael Burrows, Queen's Counsel, said it was beyond belief that Brenda took her own life by climbing into the septic tank and somehow shifted the heavy lid and put it back in place above her so that there was no sign of any disturbance. He also said it was preposterous to suppose that she walked out of their house that night and was confronted by someone outside the house. In court, David said that he regretted the affair he had with Lorraine. He also claimed that his relationship with his wife remained sexual and they continued to share a bed until she disappeared. But the court heard evidence from notes made by Brenda's consultant psychiatrist who she was seeing for treatment for the depression in March 1982, saying that the couple didn't sleep together since 1968 and didn't share a bed for 3 years. Jurors rejected David's claims of innocence and convicted him of Brenda's murder. Following his conviction, the Crown Prosecution Service said that very few people knew about the very secluded septic tank in 1982 and only 2 people had emptied the tank, David and another worker who said it had been difficult to access. As such, the CPS added it was its case that if anybody else had been responsible for Brenda's death, they would not have known about the tank as a way of concealing her body, and it was unbelievable she may have been killed somewhere else and her body returned home. Brenda's family have said that her disappearance devastated them. She was kind and caring and has been greatly missed. Quote, "We, her surviving family, are thankful that Brenda was found and that we were able to lay her to rest with her parents in a place of security, calm and dignity." End of quote. Marian Walters, who was a friend of Brenda's brother, said that the trial puts an end to decades of angst. Quote, "Nobody could imagine what it must have been like for the family. It can bring closure to all members of the family. Until the news broke 3 years ago, it's been lying dormant really. The family can hopefully, it won't be easy, but they can move on. They can move forward," Marian added." End of quote.
Brenda's disappearance was devastating for her families, for her parents who were in their 80s. Brenda was their main carer, she shopped and looked after them, so the impact on them was both emotional and practical. Her father Harold longed for her return and never gave up hope. In particular, on subsequent birthdays and anniversaries, we recall him watching the garden path in hope of Brenda coming to see them. He died heartbroken 2.5 years later. The thought that Brenda lay there for over 37 years undiscovered whilst the septic tank continued to be used is simply unthinkable. Her elder sister Rita is tormented about how Brenda came to be there. Jane, her younger sister, was always convinced that there had been foul play, but she died before a charge of murder was brought. We will never be able to forgive David Venables as a family for what he did and for not telling us the truth of what happened to Brenda. None of us will ever know how she came to be in that septic tank, and for many members of her family have died never knowing what happened to her or where she was for all those years. Brenda was kind, fun-loving and caring. He betrayed Brenda and her family. His actions and continued lies have caused family and friends untold distress over 40 years.
A jury of 5 men and 7 women took 3 days to return a guilty verdict following a trial held at Worcester Crown Court. David Venables showed no emotion when the verdict was read out. Jurors during the trial heard details of Venables' on and off 14-year-long affair with the mother of 3, Lorraine Stiles, including how he visited his mistress to have sex just a few days after his wife disappeared. On 20th of July 2022, just a few days ago, 89-year-old David Venables has been jailed for life with a minimum of 18 years. He would be 107 years old before he can apply for parole, which I don't think that he'll make it to that age, if I'm honest. So it's safe to say, in my opinion, that he will be spending the rest of his life in prison. At the sentencing hearing, the judge said that David had taken advantage of his wife's depression to create a carefully thought out story that she had left home in the middle of the night, apparently to take her own life. Miss Justice Steeples said that evidence presented in court showed that the retired pig farmer used a manhole cover to weigh down his wife's body. She told him, quote, "You killed Brenda Venables in her own home where she was recuperating with an injured leg and suffering from depression. You were Brenda's husband and she should have been able to trust you. Your complete lack of respect for Brenda is obvious from your decision to dispose of her body in the septic tank." End of quote. The judge said that the farmer was motivated to kill his wife so he could remove her from his life and the complications that she may have presented to him in any divorce proceedings. There is no doubt an element of greed and selfishness. Brenda's remains lay hidden for 37 years in an underground septic tank in the grounds of their marital home on Quaking House Farm in Kempsey and were discovered in 2019. David got away with murder for nearly 40 years until Brenda's skull was found in the 5 foot 6 inches deep tank when it was being emptied. Police officers involved in the high-profile search for Brenda after she disappeared in May 1982 described how dogs, boats and a helicopter were used to scour local waterways, fields, woodland and farm outbuildings. Retired West Mercia Constable Peter Sherrock was among the search teams. He was not aware any officers searched the underground chamber, adding, quote, "I certainly never took part in searching the septic tank. I walked past it to get to the river area for searches. Nobody mentioned searching the tank." He described how 2019 media coverage about the discovery of human remains triggered a memory of his of what he now knew to have been the tank. Giving evidence in the witness box, Mr. Sherrock was asked by David's Queen's counsel Timothy Hannum about more details of the concrete-topped tank. Mr. Sherrock said, quote, "When I saw it in the newspaper, it set off a recollection in my mind." "How far were you from it in 1982 when you saw it?" asked Mr. Hannum. "Probably about 20 or 30 meters away," said the retired officer. "I was walking across grass. I can't recall if it was in the farmhouse garden or in the neighboring field." Asked why he didn't go over to the septic tank, he said, having grown up in city areas, a non-main sewage system wasn't something that he knew about. He added, quote, "We had been directed to the woodland and we were just on our way to that area. At the time, it just looked like a pad of concrete and I didn't pay it any attention." End of quote. If only they would have paid more attention to the concrete, to the tank, they would probably have discovered then in 1982 that Brenda's body was lying there and she could have been put to rest much earlier. It's clear to me, in my opinion, that David wanted to get rid of his wife so he can be with Lorraine without having to hide anymore. Maybe he resented Brenda for not being able to have children, maybe he wanted a family, and maybe he believed that Lorraine would be able to provide that for him. Maybe he didn't want to divorce Brenda so people don't find out. After all, it was a small village. Everyone knew each other. He was a farmer. They had a business. He would have been the gossip of the village, really, and maybe that he wanted to have a good reputation. I mean, imagine the talk in the 80s of someone divorcing or someone having depression or him leaving his wife for another woman. All these kind of things, I really think that drove him to do it, to kill his wife Brenda. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please do let me know in the comment section down below, why do you think that David decided to kill his wife Brenda? Again, I want to say thank you so much for watching. Take care, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!